Good evening, ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties. This is Alex coming at you from the underworld, and welcome back to another episode of Wow. I cannot believe it's already time for me to start my lineup of Christmas-themed horror book reviews. And to be completely honest, this year has flown by because it seems like it was just yesterday when I was listing off the top 3 books that scared the ever-loving living hell out of me in 2021. But of course, here we are. And before I get started, I would just like to note that I realized over the last couple of years the Christmas themed horror books I had been reviewing were a little bit more contemporary. So for this weekend, I wanted to go back to the roots of Christmas themed horror and review something from the Victorian era. So for that reason, this weekend, I'm reviewing the Valancourt book of Victorian Christmas Ghost Stories, which was edited by Tara Moore. And move, bitch! What the hell? Carrie, really?
Ooh, the Victorian ghost. My dialogue flows like poetry. Listen to my flowery speech. Wee wee, woo woo, pee pee, poo poo.
Oh, dear sweet baby Jesus. Even at Christmas time, my life is hell. Well, also, I would like to note that I buddy read this book with 2 of my good online friends, Hanny and Nisa, which, as always, we had a lot of fun discussions, and for the most part, we were on the same page in regards to how we felt about each of the stories. So, I would like to take this opportunity to thank them for buddy reading this with me, and if either of you are watching, I hope you enjoy this review. But without further ado, let's go back in time and visit a hauntingly fun Christmas tradition that needs to be rekindled. The Valancourt book of Victorian Christmas ghost stories, edited by Tara Moore, is a collection of 13 paranormal themed tales. And throughout this work, we encounter Gothic manors, elaborate estates, the ruins of old abbeys, and even natural settings such as dark forest and icy seas. Among the horrors that are collected here, we encounter vengeful spirits, circumstances where the normal is more frightening than the paranormal, and much more. Also, we have a blend of genres within this work, such as drama, mystery, suspense, and of course horror stories that will keep you wide awake well into Christmas morning. In the introduction of the Valancourt book of Victorian Christmas ghost stories, Tara Moore explains that prior to the success of Victorian publishing, ghost stories had already been a Christmas tradition for a century, which it wasn't until the 1820s that the Christmas Library Annual became popular. And for nearly the next decade, it capitalized on removing the spoken word tradition of telling ghost stories to focusing on the written word. Decades later, after Dickens wrote A Christmas Carol, he began creating frame stories that featured some of the most popular authors of that time, with their primary focus being ghosts. Eventually, periodicals began to release special Christmas issues for ghost stories, and among these, women authors contributed the majority of fiction. As for the Victorians' love for ghost stories, their culture was already submersed in death and spiritualism, so this morbid fascination was a contributing factor to what they read. Fun facts! I would like to use this opportunity to shine light on the authors who produced some of my favorite stories in this book. The Old Nurse's Story by Elizabeth Gaskell appeared in 1852 in the first special Christmas number of Household Words, which was a periodical by Charles Dickens. Elizabeth Gaskell was born in 1810 and died in 1865. Her most famous works include Cranford, North and South, and her nonfiction work, The Life of Charlotte Bronte. Horror, a True Tale, first appeared in the January 1861 issue of Blackwood's Magazine. Originally, it was published with the author remaining anonymous, and it was presented as a true account, which during the Victorian era, this was done by multiple authors to gain more attention, while the story had no credibility as being real. Over time, Horror, a True Tale, had been attributed to the author John Berwick Hardwood, who was known for other ghost stories. John Berwick Hardwood was born in 1828 and died in 1899. The Ghost Summons by Ada Beeson originally appeared in Belgravia in January 1868. Over Ada Beeson's short career, she published one novel called Put to the Test. Following her death in 1866, the remainder of her novel, A Terrible Wrong, and many of her short stories were published. Ada Beeson was born in 1839 and was only 27 when she died. The Captain of the Pole Star by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle first appeared in the Temple Bar in January 1883. Prior to writing this short, Doyle had served on a medical post on an Arctic whaling ship from February to August of 1880. He would later explain his experience as life-changing and a right into adulthood. Doyle was born in 1859 and died in 1930, and he is famously known for his stories of Sherlock Holmes. Now that we have that out of the way, it's time to move on to the spoiler segment, which, if you haven't read this book before, I'm about to reveal some things that could ruin the experience for you. So if you would like to click away, just scroll down to the comments and you'll see that I have a pinned comment at the top. In that comment, you'll find a timestamp, which if you click that timestamp, it will direct you away from the spoilers and bring you to the thoughts section. Now, we only have 17 seconds to do this. So, ready, set, go! Since everyone's had the opportunity to click away, I would like to talk about a few of my favorite stories. First up is The Old Nurse's Story by Elizabeth Gaskell, which this is about a nurse named Hester who's telling two children about when she cared for their mother, Miss Rosamond, and how when Rosamond was a child, Hester had become her sole guardian because Rosamond's parents had both died over a fortnight. Well, to respect the wishes of the deceased, they go live with Rosamond's wealthy cousin, Lord Fernval. But while he lives in his own mansion, Esther and Rosamond are to live in a nearby manor with his Aunt Grace and her companion, Miss Stark. Then, as Hester's story continues, she elaborates on how their new residence became a full-blown nightmare where a haunted piano plays on stormy evenings and the malevolent spirits of a young mother and daughter had tried to kill Rosamond. It's really amazing how a person's taste can change over the years, because when I encountered this story about 2 Decembers ago, I didn't vibe with it whatsoever and I wrote it off as simply not being my cup of tea. But when I encountered it again this year, I decided to give it another chance, and to my surprise, I really loved it. And to be honest, I don't know what changed between now and then, but I totally felt where the atmosphere had its own character, the cast was very engaging and fleshed out, and there was this vibe of intensity that just hovered throughout the story that brought us to absolute dread. Also, I really admired how the story commented on how pride can tear apart a family and how it can result in trauma that can last well beyond death. Next up is the story called Hara, A True Tale by John Berwick Hardwood, which this introduces a narrator who had once been a beautiful young heiress. Yet, because of a disturbing event that befell her one Christmas Eve, she became a haggard woman overnight. And as she's reflecting on this life changing event, we see that her father had thrown this grand Christmas party in his mansion. And because of all of the people who were overnighting for this holiday, she had to give up her bed and sleep in a room that was possibly haunted. And as her story unfolds, it's revealed that before she retired to this spare room, a bailiff had come to their mansion and explained to her father that the 4 ewes of a nearby farmer had been found slaughtered. And while her father speculated that this could have been caused by a wild animal, the bailiff explained that there was a human footprint nearby as well as a broken chain. Well, despite this disturbing news, the narrator decided to call it a night and go to bed. However, after she got settled in, this is when the story reveals on this particular night something other than a ghost lurked in the shadows of that room. Y'all, I read this story late at night when I was home alone, and it scared the ever-loving living shit out of me. And even if all of the other stories in this book had been duds, this one story in particular still would have made my purchase worthwhile. And one thing I really loved about this was how it claimed to be a true story, and because of how it unfolded, this truly felt like it was a parent to urban legends or creepypastas, which I thought was a lot of fun. Next up is The Ghost Summons by Ada Buson, which this is about a narrator who's reflecting on his life when he was a young doctor and how on one mysterious evening he had encountered a ghostly white man named Franklin. Shortly thereafter, it's revealed that Franklin explained if the doctor sat up with him, the doctor would inherit £1,000 because Franklin believed he was going to die that night, even though he wasn't ill. From here, the doctor followed Franklin home and tried to ease him into a comfortable sleep because he was afraid that Franklin was suffering from nothing more than a troubled mind. But after a few hours passed, the doctor encountered a horror that would change his life forever. This story really surprised me because I honestly didn't know what form death would appear in. And when he finally did show his face, I was not disappointed whatsoever. Also, I was really taken back by how this ended, especially with how Franklin's wife shared similarities to the figure that had appeared next to his bed. Also, because of this twist ending, it really screwed with my head. Like, I was wondering if the ghost had manifested with features that were similar to Franklin's wife to try to throw people off, or if this particular spirit had possessed Franklin's wife, or if there were no supernatural elements to this story whatsoever, and Franklin's wife was honestly nothing more than a killer. So, because of it kind of being open-ended there, it was a story that stayed with me. Now, even though these are 3 stories that I really did enjoy, there were quite a few other stories in this book that I would rank to be among my favorites, and for that reason, I'm about to shine light on another one in my next segment. I would like to take this opportunity to bitch about that dipshit captain in the story called The Captain of the Pole Star by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Now, this is taken from the journal of a doctor by the name of John who had stood post on the ship called the Pole Star. And after the ship got stuck in ice, John documents the next 8 days of them being stranded, where we learn about this asshat by the name of Captain Kriege and a ghost that's been terrorizing the shit out of the seamen. So let me paint a picture for you here. Everyone on this ship, the captain included, has all had the bejesus scared out of them because there's a ghost roaming around outside. On top of that, their food rations have decreased more and more every day. But the captain don't give a damn about that. All he's worried about is continuing forward so he can get rich off of oil. And even though they can't technically move forward because the sea ahead has frozen over, they do have ample opportunity to back that ass up and go back the same way they came to the land of steak and potatoes. Y'all, I'm about to get real here. I can take the ghost and I can take the cold. That ain't no problem at all. However, you tell me that I have to share my Reese's with some other asshole, then it's time to admit defeat and go home before I kill some bitch. The Valancourt book of Victorian Christmas ghost stories, edited by Tara Moore, presents a great diversity of scenarios and writing styles. So for those reasons, I feel like this book has a little bit of something for everyone. And out of the 13 stories, there were 8 that I absolutely loved, 1 that was okay, and 4 that just wasn't my cup of tea whatsoever. So, as you can tell, there are more good stories in this book than there are bad. Also, for those who are curious, my top 5 favorite stories include The Nurse's Story, Horror a True Tale, The Ghost Summons, The Captain of the Pole Star, and The Doll's Ghost. Aside from that, even though I mentioned there are more good stories than bad in this book, unfortunately, the stories that I didn't like were some of the longest in this collection. And about the third time I came across a story that began with chapter 1, I instantly just felt let down and knew that this was going to be a story I wasn't going to enjoy. And by the time I got to the end of those stories, yeah, I just didn't vibe with them. But as I said, this book has a good diversity to it, and I'm sure someone out there will enjoy those longer stories. Unfortunately, I'm not that person. Character-wise, there were only a few stories where I felt true concern for the well-being of the protagonist, which those stories would include The Old Nurse's Story, Horror a True Tale, and Captain of the Pole Star. Otherwise, it feels like the character development fell flat, and I'm not certain if that's because I couldn't relate to the characters or because the characters were too one-dimensional and not complex enough. Regardless, even though I couldn't vibe with a lot of the protagonists, I was still very interested in their stories as the scenarios that surrounded them remained interesting. Of course, this doesn't apply for the stories that I did not like whatsoever. Theme-wise, I noticed where a few of these stories focused on the downfall of pride, which a good example is seen in the tale called The Old Nurse's Story, whereas other installments like Horror a True Tale comments on vanity and appearance. And what would a horror Christmas collection be without obsession and greed, which these subjects are touched on in stories like Bring Me a Light and The Captain of the Pole Star. Overall, except for one story, this book really didn't scare me. And while there wasn't any gross out tales or anything like that, there were quite a few creepy stories that stayed with me long after I finished my read. The Valancourt book of Victorian Christmas ghost stories, edited by Tara Moore, was fun to read late at night. And while I expected the majority of these tales to take place on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, I was surprised to find out that quite a few of these installments had nothing to do with Christmas whatsoever. So for that reason, this book really didn't put me in the Christmas spirit, but it did put me in the mood for colder weather. And at the end of the day, if you're looking for a creepy ghost story collection that's suitable for the darker months of the year, then I do highly recommend this collection. Now that I'm at the end of this video, I would just like everyone to know that I had intended to upload this last weekend, but unfortunately I injured my back and there were a few nights there where it was so bad I couldn't even talk. So that absolutely sucked. My back still hurts, but it's nowhere near as bad as what it was. So yeah, just please forgive the delay. And I know that this week Yule and Hanukkah are already going full swing, so happy Hanukkah to all of my Jewish viewers and happy Yule to all of my pagan viewers. Also, I'm hoping to have another video up before Christmas, so if that doesn't happen, Merry Christmas to everyone and a happy upcoming Kwanzaa. So, with that said, I would now like to take this opportunity to thank these amazing people for contributing to my Patreon account. As you can tell, some of the names listed here are creators, so be sure to check out their work. And if you would like to contribute to my Patreon as well, I have a link available in the description section of this episode where for $5 a month, I'll give you a shout out like what you see here. And if there is a certain profession you would like to have tied to your name, just let me know and I'll include that as well. Also, I have a $10 tier available where for $10 a month you'll still receive the shout out that you see here, but I do creepy photography on the side, so at the beginning of every month I'll send you over one of my creepy photos. From there, you can print it off, do whatever you like. So if you're able to do this, that's awesome. If not, no sweat. I just hope you return to this channel so we can have a good time together. Also, if you would like to hit me up on social media, links to my Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram are all available in the description section of this episode. And if you have not subscribed to this channel, be sure to subscribe and click that notifications bell because I have more book reviews coming in the near future. So, until we see each other again, I hope you're doing well and sweet nightmares.